Ever felt like you were being watched? That eerie sensation that sends shivers down your spine, making the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It's a feeling that can be hard to shake, especially when it lingers in the corners of your mind, refusing to be dismissed as mere paranoia. Emily knows the feeling all too well. From a young age, she was no stranger to the unsettling sensation of unseen eyes following her every move. It was a feeling that had become all too familiar, a constant companion in the shadows of her life. Given to her by her grandmother years ago, the porcelain doll with its glassy eyes and frozen smile seemed to haunt Emily throughout her childhood. The doll, with its delicate features and intricate clothing, was a relic from a bygone era, a piece of history that seemed to carry with it a weight of its own. Its presence was both captivating and unnerving, a paradox that Emily could never quite reconcile. As she grew older, she shoved it into a box, then buried it deep in her closet, hoping to forget it forever so. Years passed. The doll became a distant memory, a ghost of her past that she believed she had finally laid to rest. But some things are not so easily forgotten, and the past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. She moved to a new apartment, unpacking her life anew. The excitement of a fresh start filled her with hope and anticipation. She meticulously arranged her belongings, each item finding its place in a new home. It was a chance to leave behind the shadows of her past and embrace a brighter future. But there it was, the doll staring back at her with that same unsettling gaze. It was as if the doll had followed her, refusing to be left behind. Its eyes, though lifeless, seemed to hold a spark of malevolence, a silent threat that sent a chill through her bones. She hesitated, but placed it on a high shelf, out of sight. Or so she thought. She hoped that by keeping it out of view, she could also keep it out of mind, but the doll's presence was a constant reminder, a silent sentinel watching over her every move. Weeks went by without incident until one stormy night Emily returned home late. The wind howled outside and the rain battered against the windows, creating an atmosphere of foreboding. She was tired, her mind preoccupied with the events of the day, and she longed for the comfort of her bed. She flipped on the light and froze. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took in the scene before her. The room was just as she had left it, except for one thing. The doll was sitting on her bed, head tilted, eyes fixed on the window, a tiny porcelain hand pointing. Her breath hitched. It was impossible. She had placed the doll on the high shelf, out of reach. How had it moved? The question echoed in her mind, but no answer came. She checked every room, no signs of entry, nothing out of place except the doll. It was as if the doll had a life of its own, moving about the apartment with a willful intent. The thought was absurd, yet the evidence was undeniable. The next morning it was on the windowsill, staring out into the grey morning. The doll's eyes seemed to follow her as she moved about the room, a silent observer of her every action. The unease that had settled in her chest the night before had not dissipated. If anything, it had grown stronger. Tiny handprints smeared on the glass sent chills down her spine. They were too small to be her own, and there was no one else in the apartment. The realization hit her like a cold wave, and she felt a sense of dread settle over her. Desperate, she trashed it and watched the garbage truck take it away. She felt a momentary sense of relief, believing that she had finally rid herself of the cursed doll. But deep down, a nagging doubt remained. Could it really be that simple? That night, she finally slept peacefully, or so she thought. The weight of the past few days seemed to lift, and she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. At 3:33 a.m., a tapping sound from the window woke her. The sound was faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the city outside. But it grew louder, more insistent, until it was impossible to ignore. Heart racing, she turned on the lamp. The room was bathed in a soft, warm light, but it did little to dispel the darkness that seemed to cling to the corners. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. There it was, the doll. It sat on the windowsill, its eyes gleaming in the dim light. The sight of it sent a jolt of fear through her, and she felt her hands begin to tremble. Sitting on the windowsill, mocking her with a wider smile. The doll's expression had changed, its smile now twisted into something far more sinister. It was as if the doll was taunting her, reveling in her fear. And Emily knew this nightmare was far from over. The realization hit her with a crushing weight. The doll was not just an inanimate object, it was something far more malevolent, and it was not going to let her go so easily. The battle had only just begun, and Emily knew she would have to face her fears head-on if she ever hoped to escape